Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of E&Ftv. Today, we're joined by the brilliant Siim Karu, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at A&O Hostels. Siim, thanks very much for joining us today.
Tom, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to finally get you on the show. It's, I mean, I don't even know how many years we've worked together now on various different opportunities, but obviously in different businesses as well. So it's great to have you on the show. Obviously, with regards to the show, we usually like to try and understand a bit about the guest first, a bit about your background, and I suppose what brought you to your most current role. So please do tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. I'll start from the beginning. I mean, it's literally 10 years this year, December. So it's quite interesting to think about the first contact I had with revenue management, and that was really during my internship at a Swiss hotel property, and that was basically when, obviously, I didn't know back then what the other hotels were doing, but within Swiss hotel, revenue management was in baby steps. There were a couple of Excel tables that the revenue managers on property were using to calculate something about their booking pace and pickup, but that there was really almost nothing, as we know today. There was no direct connectivity, no dynamic pricing, and it was just about the year when they started using channel managers. So it was very, very different. So sometimes I think about that when I'm complaining to a tech partner about some 5-minute downtimes of connectivity or stuff like that. So it's been an interesting 10 years seeing how the hospitality revenue management has been just evolving hand in hand with the technology and obviously getting more and more online, more and more dynamic, and just more fast-paced. Here we are now, doing basically fully automated price decisions with a proper tech stack. So it's been a fun 10 years. Yeah.
Definitely. And I suppose in terms of your current role, then, so Chief Revenue Officer, I mean, what brought you to that role, and obviously, what is that now within the business?
Well, it was a newly created position at A&O. I joined the company just over a year ago from Generator Hostels, where we went through the process of basically bringing the kind of the advanced hotel revenue management techniques and technologies into the hostel sector. So when we started with Generator, there was absolutely nothing out there in terms of bed specific pricing, and all the tools and the technology was geared towards hotels, which was somewhat inconvenient for hostels, because obviously we have different types of inventories within the same building. So you have the hotel rooms, but at the same time there are large family rooms, dormitories, beds in dormitories. So none of the existing tools could actually work with that. And once we had gone through the process at Generator fairly successfully over those years, then that caught the attention of the hostel industry, with more and more investment getting into the hostel sector. So it was, I think, since about 2016, 2017, there's been more and more private equity investment going into the hostel sector, and the same happened with A&O. So TPG Real Estate bought A&O back in 2017, and they also wanted to take a completely new look at how we do pricing and how do we get the maximum out of this business. So we started talking to A&O about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years ago for the first time, so one thing led to another, and I felt like this would be a great challenge and a great project to take on, because we're talking about the biggest player in the hostel business. We have 28,000 beds to fill every day. So making it work in this organization felt like the ultimate challenge, because the company's been there for 20 years. So there are some legacy systems, but also legacy processes in place, which people have done certain things in a certain way for the last 20 years, then changing the mindset is one challenge. Changing the tech itself is another challenge, and that's how we came to the conclusion that there needs to be a role on the management level to really enforce these changes in the organization, and not just have something, let's put it this way, having the revenue management within either a sales or finance or IT infrastructure. That just wouldn't have made sense anymore. And yeah, that's how I came here, and then we've had a very adventurous first year with A&O, obviously fueled by first the changes and then the pandemic. So it's been a wild one.
Yeah, no, I can second that one. It certainly has been. I suppose coming on to your experience, now anybody that knows you or that's gone onto your LinkedIn profile will see all the different regions, all the different countries that you've actually been working in. Now that exposure and that experience, I can imagine, has opened your eyes to a lot of different ways of working, but also I suppose the different levels of sophistication within revenue management and the discipline itself. So I suppose it'd be really interesting to get your insight into that side of things, of how, I suppose globally you've seen how different ways of working are within revenue management.
Yeah, absolutely. It is actually quite interesting to see how it really differs regionally, and also then within those regions, you have different organizations. Depends how, what sort of a company background they have, whether they've had an affiliation to the giants. I mean, speaking about like Marriott's or Hilton's, obviously they bring the know-how from their home countries, but it's hard to, I think it's impossible to say that a certain region is on a certain level in comparison to the others, but it is definitely very different. So I will never forget my first week when I was in Hong Kong, and I was just introduced. I was transferred over from the Frankfurt office within the same organization, and so obviously the revenue management structure was in place actually same way in Europe as it was in Asia. It was a European company with a few hotels in Asia, so we established a Hong Kong head office, and I was sent there to basically then start really managing the revenues the way we do it in Europe. And then even though the system had been in place, there was no one actually in Asia, so there was always a lack of communication.
Right.
And my first meeting with the local director of the whole company was actually one I will never forget. He sat me down and said, Siim, I'm so grateful that you are finally in Hong Kong and doing revenue management here. It's absolutely fantastic, because now you can finally learn how it's really done. I mean, I almost fell off my chair, because I was like, first I felt like, I felt like a god sitting there, and then he just smashed me down to a whole different level, and that's where I learned that actually it's, regardless of what your professional expertise in that field is, the number one skill that you need to be successful internationally is the diplomatic skill. And I remember, so I mean, obviously it was quite a few years ago, so I think I definitely lacked some experience in communication, but in that moment I was able to really keep it calm, and I think I took a long break to breathe in and out, and then I just said, Mr. So, I'm so grateful to be here and then finally have the opportunity to learn from you. And then I realized only later that he was sort of also playing with me, that he was basically fishing for my reaction, because only later I heard that there was always a tension between Europe and Asia within the company, so he was kind of testing me with my response. And since then we became like really close, and the next I think almost 2 years we worked together. It was a great relationship. Yeah. But it was definitely an encounter I will never forget.
Because obviously I'm not familiar. So are there any sort of major suppose, differences in that region of the world in terms of revenue management and its complexity, or is it sort of incredibly similar? It's just more in depth.
Well, my answer is obviously based on 2016, 2015 to 2017. So it might be different now, but for me, the biggest difference was, I mean, the business mix is somewhat different. You still have a very strong, like the static wholesale business share, which I think in Europe almost doesn't exist anymore, at least in the segments I've been operating in. It almost doesn't exist anymore. Whereas like in Hong Kong, in Shanghai, in Beijing, we still had a very strong portion of that business. And the relationships with the agencies were a lot more complex. So, I mean, they have so much more power because the market is huge, and it is very consolidated to a few key players. I mean, in terms of OTAs, in Europe, we hear about Ctrip being a sort of a big player in Asia. People here cannot quite actually understand how big they are. Like the power that Booking.com has in Europe is nothing compared to what Ctrip does in Asia. It's like, there are hotels that, if Ctrip comes to them and says, next year I'm going to pay you, I don't know, 50 euros a room every day, take it or leave it. There are hotels that they have to say yes because they have absolutely nothing else that will keep them alive. And it's like we walked into one of the major wholesalers. There was the biggest account we had, and we had a lot of problems with the offline rates popping up online, which it was a case. I had dealt with that already in Europe, and we literally, I remember us telling to hotel beds and GTAs already years and years ago. We said like, oh, if this happens again, we terminate the partnership, and that's it. And that was it. Like in Europe, that was the end of conversation. Problems either disappeared or were really terminated. And that was that. And that was it with one of our Shanghai properties. We walked into the local FIT wholesaler office, and we said like we are very concerned about these problems, and if this continues, we have to terminate the agreement. And the guy just looks at me and says, "Okay, we'll terminate it then." And I felt like a complete idiot because me, as well as my local sales director, we knew very well we cannot actually afford terminating them because they were 40% of the whole revenue we used to make. So it's a lot more aggressive. It's a lot more it's a sort of a power relationship. So it's who has the money has the power, and that's it. There is no middle way relationship handling as such. It's not about making each other happy. It's as long as you make money, you're fine. And I remember us walking out of that office 20 minutes later, feeling like complete idiots because we went in with basically we had a bad plan for the negotiation, and we walked out with no result of the negotiation. We went back to our desks, and that was it. That's the whole conversation we had, and that's when I understood it's just the whole way of doing business there is very different, and that just made it a bit more complex moving to fully dynamic pricing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. It's interesting because again, I've never had any exposure, I suppose, to that region, so it's just interesting to hear. Okay, this question is not controversial, but I think there will be some mixed feelings about it. Now, your philosophy when it comes to revenue management could be considered incredibly different to a lot of others. And I'd love for you to actually give us a bit of an idea of what your philosophy is to it. So please do.
Yeah, I can see where you see the controversy there. So yeah, in terms for background information, yeah, then at A&O, so we have 39 properties, 8,200 rooms, and then 28,000 beds now running, on full automation, and that's meaning we don't have a single revenue manager in the company anymore. So it's absolutely tech driven. So we only have 2 analysts who service the whole company. So not just kind of the revenue team, which is me. But I have 2 guys who work on our databases full time, basically doing day to day just first, data engineering, but then also analytical work to find any sort of opportunities in either the room sales or bar sales, ancillary sales, anything like that. And at the same time, we also actually power the financial team and the accounting team with financial reports. So in that sense, they have a much broader role than just working on the revenue management side of things. So yeah, the approach is in that sense very simple. For me, the number one priority is to get the basics right, which is we set out a very detailed long-term strategy, which we define in our revenue management system. And once that's in place, then obviously the system is able to just run on full automation within the price bandwidth we give them with minimum maximum rates. Within the hostel sector, it is somewhat different because obviously we don't have just one price for the house, or we don't have only room types, but it's really the room classification, whether it's hotel rooms, family rooms, or dormitories. And within dormitories, you also have different pricing for the size of the dormitory, and then either it's the full dormitory or just a single bed within the dormitory. And within the family room classification, we also have different combinations of family rooms, depending, is it 2 adults, 2 kids, or is it a family of might be 4 adults or 6 adults. So the physical rooms are different, but the pricing within the categories is even much more diverse. So the setup process in that sense is quite complex, but we use data to really define that strategy for the future. So we have the kind of the power to really mine the data the way that we like to. So we can pull up any sort of an analytical comparison that we need to get to the new price strategy, and that's something I define together with the colleagues from sales to get their input as well, and what they hear from the market or from the partners, especially in terms of group business. And then the system does its magic for the dynamic side. Obviously, we cannot just keep it running and with no monitoring. So we have quite a range of dashboards and reports in place, which will just help us keep an eye on any irregularities, any exceptions where we see either the system not behaving how we would expect it to behave, or the other way around, if we see that the demand isn't behaving as we would normally expect it to behave, and therefore we only manage those exceptions. So we do manual interference, but only if in case of exceptions. Obviously, with a team that small, myself with 2 data guys, that's already pretty much the maximum input. We could even see, as at least with the current number of properties and the team size. So, but so far it's been successful. So we see on average we have about 98-99% of the price movement fully automated with no interference. So that the number of cases where we actually have to interfere is extremely low. And to my surprise, positive surprise, even through the pandemic, once it started and once it then sort of recovered in the summer and then dropped again, it actually worked out really well. So we were very pleased to see that it worked even in cases where normally you would expect that the system might not have the full picture, but we were very happy with the reaction of the system.
Fantastic. It's interesting because I suppose my question to you would be, if the wider hospitality industry starts to adopt this way of working, could this mean the death of the revenue manager role as we know it, or does it mean it will adapt, or what do you see? Because obviously your philosophy is built very much on tech being the driver here, and of almost having a revenue or commercially minded individual that can, of course, intervene or manipulate where needed. So I suppose where does it go in terms of your perspective, I suppose?
I think it is a natural evolution, because I mean, so you said revenue manager role as we see it, but I was now just thinking back at the how we started, about how it was 10 years ago, and 10 years is a short time for a profession, right? So just thinking about those 10 years that I've been in the business, I think it's very hard to say what has been the revenue manager's role in those 10 years. It's been really going from first, someone good on Excel, or 10 years ago, the obvious choice who was the next revenue manager was, well, the guy who used to run the reservation team. And if they knew Excel, it was even better, because then they had the full package deals to say, hey, if you know reservations, Excel, that's good.
You're perfect.
So and then over the years, we came to the position where people started talking about, well, should the revenue manager take over the sales? Should they sit on top, on the side? What should it be? And before we could even answer that question, then kind of more and more hotels adopted revenue management systems, where the role became a more independent again, I would say, kind of less salesy position. So it became more like now, much more dynamic, much faster. So even though the systems came, so you could think that there was more time left over for the revenue manager to have, coffee and chat with the sales guys. But instead, what we started doing, we actually finally had the full picture, because, doing manual revenue management, you can only manage the next, how many days. But with a system, you had a much, much bigger picture in front of you, so you could manage so much more. And I think it's only natural that now, with technology improving and data science improving, we need less and less hours to actually do the same thing. So if I sort of think about, what I do every day, a couple of hours every day, I still do what I used to do a few years ago with only 6-7 properties, whereas now I do it with 39. So the basic process is the same. Whereas it's just that with the help of technology and data science, we're able to capture a lot more at the same time. So we're just becoming a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's sort of the death of the revenue managers, but I do think it's transformational time, in the sense that for a revenue manager to keep up with the market and with the evolution, they need to make sure that they keep up with the latest trends in the tech and in BI, having at least a basic understanding of what SQL is, or what is Python, what is R. Nobody expects a revenue manager to write Python or R, but it's good if they know what it is. If you mention Python, then they don't think about the snake, I think it's just transformational, and I'm definitely not saying that the role is going away. It is changing, in a sense that, like, any asset manager, any investor nowadays expects the revenue management role to be centralized, or at least clustered. Single property revenue managers, that's definitely something which I think only companies would do if they don't have any idea how it could be done. But hey, some statistics still say that 70% of the hotels in the world don't do revenue management, so there should be enough jobs for all of us.
Yeah. And I'm actually so happy with what you said in terms of the response, because that's something that I've been badgering on about. If anybody watching this has watched any previous episodes or anything that I've actually appeared on recently, it's all been about the transformation, or the evolution is probably the better word for it, of a revenue manager and the role itself, because it is becoming a wider commercial role rather than just a revenue manager role, which is just all about that. It's long gone are the days of just changing pricing. We all know that. And long gone are the days of these dark roomed report writers that just send them on to the sales and operational teams. That's just not the way it was. Well, not the way it is anymore. And as you say, over the last 10 years, we've seen that. The revenue management role has changed almost every single year.
Yeah.
And I suppose the expectation of a revenue manager, so the expectation from the brand or expectation of the hotel or whatever business it is, has developed as well. They're expecting a lot more from revenue managers, and rightly so. The profession has changed, but as of the times and as of the market. So, and as we know, I mean, going into a post-pandemic market, we're going to see we're going to have to see strong revenue managers really stepping up to the plate anyway.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah. So I mean, it's the key here is really just keep an open mind and learn new things, because I mean, business intelligence is something which is so simple yet so complicated, because like, we see how little proper data science is actually done within. I mean, hospitality in kind of in tech adoption is anyway pretty bad as an industry, but you can do so many good decisions, and you don't need expensive resources to actually slice and dice your existing data, but just have obviously you cannot do it with with an Excel table or with PMS reports. So you need some database knowledge to actually get going with it. But this role within the hospitality companies is definitely stepping up now, and we've seen. I mean, for example, this summer alone, when we had basically like 3 months of good trading in relative terms in 2020, but how much more stuff we found out about our own business during the time, just because we actually went into really big data analysis. That was just amazing, and that wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have just very basic database structure in place where we could run a very quick MySQL analysis on it. Yeah.
I suppose finally, in terms of obviously you guys, what's been happening? What's been happening to you guys during obviously these difficult times, but obviously going forward, I suppose.
We're conservatively positive, if you can say that.
Happy to hear it.
It's like so obviously it's been a wild year. Yeah. So we had suddenly in March we went from so January, February were the first 2 months in A&O where we had the new system almost fully in place. We were still rolling out the new structure to the portfolio. So I think I had about 20 out of 39 live in January, and then in February we actually finished the rollout of the new system. So it was transformational. We had January, February, we hit all-time highs in both months, and it was just amazing to see. We were so stoked for the year. We just thought like, okay, this is gonna be a good one. So I mean, what an introduction for me in a new company. So when the whole thing started in the end of February, we saw the first trouble signs in Italy. We have a lot of inventory in Venice, and we saw early trouble signs in February, and then the last week of February, it went down so quickly that from the first warning signs, I think it was the first week of Feb, we had the early warnings that the booking pace in Venice is dropping. And then the third week of February, we shut down Venice properties completely. So it was literally less than 20 days where we went from slower numbers to fully just shutting down with the local restrictions there. And then in March, it was a complete disaster. We had just millions of euros of cancellations coming in every day, and we went from having something like tens of millions of revenue on the books to having almost nothing. So it was a very difficult time, just psychologically, especially in a role like we're talking about revenue management. You start to question just kind of your value within the organization. You're like, well, should I be the nice guy and say, well, hey, you can save the payroll, or like, well, what's next, right? So, because I think we just had no clue what the timeline was gonna be. There was just no information, and obviously everybody were in the same pot. But luckily, already in the end of May, where we have I think almost 70% of our inventory in Germany, so which ended up actually being very good for us, because Germany had a very strong domestic recovery. Then as soon as they opened the travel restrictions in the end of May, June, we saw a very steep curve up again. So the curve up was basically as steep as it was down in March, and we benefited a lot from not shutting down the property. So other than locations where it was locally mandated that we had to shut down, like there were a few cities in Germany, I think in Austria there was for a few weeks, and in Italy where there was a mandate to close all establishments. Other than that, we never shut down the locations because we were able to drive down the cost so radically that we basically had no difference in keeping the doors open or closed, because even if you close, you're still going to need someone on property, security, or maintenance. Something has to be there. You cannot just leave the property and abandon it, unless you never plan on going back. So we were able to drive down the cost so radically that we decided to keep all doors open, all the properties bookable. And that was probably the best decision we made, because we saw a much earlier recovery than we saw that the other hotels experienced, based on SDR and based on just local feedback as well. And then from the beginning of July until the end of September, we were running some sort of a 90% room occupancy across the chain, which was astonishing. I mean, I never expected to see that, and that was. Obviously, we had a very aggressive strategy to take that market position and to get as many people back to our houses as possible. So we did a very strong market penetration there, but it worked for us. So you can argue about the philosophy. This time we succeeded. And then obviously in October, the whole thing started again with the first regions going into lockdown, and with some political decisions, questionable political decisions, coming from the governments.
Yeah. No, but it's fantastic to hear the performance coming through, though. And as you said, your philosophy, if it can be argued against, the proof is very much in the pudding in that situation. So. Fair play to everybody in the business, obviously including yourself. Well, Siim, I just want to say a massive thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to join us today. As I said, there's a few things there for people to either question or argue with, but I think either way, it's going to make for some really interesting dialogue. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same here. It was a good one. Speak soon again, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. And guys, make sure you see who's on next week's episode now.